Good morning and good afternoon, and we've got a special guest today. So many of you probably know him, and if you don't, well, it's a shame, but it's Program Director for MSc Finance, and if you want to introduce yourself, it's probably the best thing.
Yes, thank you, Lucas. So glad to be with you, and thank you for inviting me. My name is George Namur, and I'm the Program Director of MSc Finance at UCL School of Management.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm sure you got a busy day, so it's been great that you've been able to take the time. Could you just quickly give a background about yourself, I guess, individually, before we get on to the other things for more context about yourself?
As by way of background, I was educated as an engineer, and I went all the way in that field. I got a PhD in civil engineering, and I tried my hand at working in that business. Nevertheless, it didn't take me too long to realize that while I was probably good at what I was doing, I was not super happy and fulfilled. The passion was missing. So, at some point I decided, I'm going to put this aside. I'm going to go and get re-educated again and follow my heart, follow my passion, which had to do with finance and financial markets. So I got an MBA in analytical finance, started working on Wall Street. Then I worked in a quantitative consulting shop. Then I went on to work in the space of energy that included oil and gas, but also electricity. Had then an entrepreneurial bent and started my own wealth management and wealth advisory firm, which is still around. Had another entrepreneurial bent where I became CEO of an algorithmic FX trading operation with partners out of Munich, Germany. And then I think I'm the accidental educator. I think I stumbled upon education by accident. I was motivated by the desire to give back. I thought I was fortunate in so many ways, and it's only fair to give back, and lest this be perceived as something entirely altruistic, it's fair to say that I get a lot out of it. It's very reinforcing and such a positive energy for me. So I'm very happy to be engaged in education right now.
Yeah, it's amazing. Are you doing this full-time now, or are you still engaged with your companies?
Full-time and engaged in companies at the same time. So, as they say, sometimes you need to know how to walk and chew gum at the same time.
Yeah, of course, amazing. What exactly is your role within UCL then? If you could briefly describe it.
Well, my primarily I'm an educator. So the fact that I'm an associate professor in finance is my primary role. I like teaching. I teach traditional modules, but I also teach practitioner-oriented modules, which seem to have some appeal to students who have this quest to have an insight into the professional world even before they join the workforce. But obviously, in previous years, I was engaged in teaching more traditional modules at the undergrad and postgrad level. In my capacity as program director, obviously I have to oversee the program, make sure that all the offerings that we have are adequately staffed. I look out after the well-being of my students. I need to build bridges to them. I get engaged also in the staffing of different modules. But for me, an important part of what I do is plant the seeds for this relationship with my students that right now is relationship between PD and students, but starting next year will be with alumni, or in other words, with colleagues, right? People in the same space, professionals in finance. So that's kind of how I see my role at UCL.
It's interesting. The word students have come up a lot, and I understand obviously that is probably the main beneficiary of the course, and that's who you're selling to, I suppose. And one question I had, and I think a lot of students, whenever they talk about it's quite a financial burden to do education of any kind. One question I had was, and it's changed for a lot of courses where it comes, but where is the value that you see that the program offers? Because obviously there are a lot of other programs similar to this one. However, there's only one MSc Finance at UCL. I'm just wondering, where do you focus that value that a lot of these students can expect when they pay for their course, essentially, their fees? Where is that focus on, in your opinion? Is it the professors providing it? Is it the course material, the connections? What is that?
That's a very fair question, and I need to start by saying, we are not the only purveyors of quality education, whether within UCL or without UCL. So, there are lots of respectable programs. The way I see us being different is in the focus, right? In the way we successfully combine between solid fundamentals, helping students understand the basics of finance, and a practitioner-oriented modules that would give you a sneak preview, if you want, into specific professions, whether it's wealth management and private banking, whether it's investment banking, or hedge funds, or private equity. I think this is special, and I think the fact that this program is being led by a practitioner as opposed to, let's say, a pure academic who spends all their time either researching or teaching is a testament to the extent to which we believe in giving our students an MSc Finance experience as opposed to MSc Finance education, right? And education in and of itself is changing nowadays. Information is much more freely available. If all you want is to hear specifics about the subject matter, all you need to do is search for a YouTube video on this particular topic, or Khan Academy, or any of the online education providers, and you'll get that. So for me, that would not be enough. If I perceived our role to only be providers of information, that would be a disappointment for me. If we did not prepare our students to conquer the world, to go and face all the challenges, it's a little bit like machine learning. In the olden days, when people in my business would use computers to make money in the markets, they would basically teach the computer to follow rules, right? So the idea of program trading, for example, was all about rules-based programs. And nowadays, in the era of machine learning, deep learning, you're teaching the computer to teach itself, not to obey your orders, because you want them at some point to outthink you and be better than you, be an extension of you. So it's a funny metaphor, but I tend to think of my role with my students as shaping their minds, not feed them information, which they're likely to forget, or some of it, if they don't use it. But they will never forget how to use their minds. They will never forget how to approach a problem. That will stay with them, and that is a true value added.
Yeah, sure. I think that's really important, though. And considering that you mentioned just that the module is the course is rather practitioner orientated, right? Especially if we look at the module hedge funds, where we had to follow the market data and stuff. How do you transfer the real life data, the real life knowledge to the other courses for, let's say, advanced quantitative finance, for example?
Are you saying like how to keep up to date with the trends that are happening? Right. Yeah, it's preparing. You mentioned it several times just now, the challenges that people might face, especially in the financial, sector. And I think then is just how do you prepare and approach the teaching material or the course itself to stay up to date with those trends, to be prepared for the challenges.
Absolutely. I mean, there are always advances that take place. Obviously, in modules that have to do with a practice, with a business, advances are likely to be more pronounced and faster. In modules that use technology, such as, let's say, fintech, the advances are a lot faster, and we make sure that we are a step ahead of what is happening. Now, you mentioned AQF, Advanced Quantitative Finance. Now, a lot of this is not going to change, right? A lot of the aspects of using computational methods or partial differential equations, for example, to price complex instruments, that is not likely to change. I think the challenge that we have as educators, as MSc Finance, is as we teach our students the foundation of, let's say, pricing derivatives, is to not lose touch of, but where would this apply in the real world? If I've learned to, I don't know, whip up a binomial tree to price a complex option, right, a barrier option, for example, or if I decided to use Monte Carlo simulations, where would that come up? Who does that? Who would make markets in binary options? I don't need to teach you about who makes markets on the standard options, because I know you took hedge fund strategies. But what about binary options? Where are they likely to come up? Which asset class? Why is it that you find it more in FX, for example, than you would find it in equities? In my old life, in the world of energy, we used to use a lot of barrier options in energy, because we would want to have them either kicked in or kicked out, or knocked in, knocked out by weather situations, right? If the average temperature, degree days we used to call it, hits a certain thing, then the option dies, for example. So I think our challenge is not necessarily to change the mathematics of some of the topics that we teach. I mean, they are what they are, and they're not likely to change immensely unless somebody discovers a new way of pricing derivatives.
Yeah, it's actually funny that you mentioned Monte Carlo options and barrier options, because we had to do them in the exam for AQF. So what a coincidence! Coursework and stuff.
And then they're super important. And one of the first things that I did in the second chapter of my life when I started in finance was precisely to get into advanced derivatives as related to fixed income, to interest rates. And you learn about all these things and you see them. And I was blessed in that. I mean, of course, I knew them from school, but when you're on the desk and you're listening to the calls that customers are making, and they would explain to you why they want it that way. Or sometimes the idea doesn't come from the customer, it comes from our desk, and say, okay, have you thought about doing it that way? That would, for example, would cheapen your option. It would make it a lot more affordable. And listen, the event that would kill your option is extremely unlikely. You would give them statistics about how likely it is to happen, and then you let them decide.
It's absolutely very important to know where it comes into play practically. I think that's something. One thing we had to do was we talked about learning the Black-Scholes and Easter-Slim, and we all thought, where does this come in? How possibly? Or it's all automated now. But it's true that you need to know before it's put in the computer how this possibly will affect it up or down or left or right. Or
whatever the Greeks, obviously.
Yeah, this is a very good point, because quantitative as we are, we don't want our students or our incoming students, for applicants, incoming students, to think that our objective is to teach them mathematics. In fact, you asked us what makes us so special relative to others. I don't mind telling you that the Department of Mathematics at UCL also offers a certain flavor of finance. But that is a different flavor, right? Their focus is obviously on financial mathematics. We want that, but we want to put it in context, and we always want you to think about where does that apply.
Really interesting you talked about the incoming students. I know we're low on time, so the last thing I want to ask was, you talk about incoming students, but I guess one thing a lot of people worry about and get anxious about, especially in us, and we're now in third term and coming to the end, is what would you say to those exiting who are, I suppose, more anxious about getting a job? Because that is essentially the end goal of any degree education, is to be able to place yourself in a good position to be able to get that tap into that potential that you've invested in, I suppose. So if you have any parting words, and
I mean, considering the current economic circumstances, which isn't easy for us, right? Everyone's cutting costs and stuff, so what would you recommend there?
That's a very fair question, and unlike perhaps PGT students in other programs where their pursuit is very academic, we recognize the fact that our students apply here and join us because of that dream of getting that job in finance, whatever your dream is, buy side, sell side, consulting, fintech, whatever it is. So we're cognizant of that. And you said, especially in light of the economic situation, it looks like the UK is going to get into a recession pretty soon. But I dare say it's a challenge even if economic conditions are not very difficult. And the argument is all about supply and demand, right? If you think about how much amazing talent is being generated by top universities and schools in and around London versus the extent to which the industry is expected to expand, whether in commercial banking, investment banking, fintech, other financial services, consulting, hedge funds, private equity, etc. You recognize that almost by design, the landscape is becoming more and more and more competitive. I would think 10, 15 years ago, the mere fact that you have an MSc Finance from a top school in London would easily get you a job. Those days are gone, and the days where it would be possible for you to just coast through the program and watch employers reach out to you and say, we'd love to talk to you about this and that, I think those days are gone. I think nowadays the most successful students in terms of looking for a job, but more likely managing their careers are the ones, who take ownership of the process and say, what, I own this. In other words, if I get the job, yes, my degree helped me, but it's me. I got the job, right? It's not so-and-so who got me the job. And if I'm struggling, it's also a little bit me. Sure, market conditions, sure, situation, sure, supply and demand. But it's a little bit me, Am I doing all I can? Am I knocking on all doors? Am I optimizing all the opportunities that are available to me? Shameless plug, am I attending all the corporate speaker series events that are offered to me? So part of it is that. Part of it is, am I adaptable? Am I flexible? So I dream of working in a fintech company if it looks like this is a bit difficult, but it's a bit easier for me to start at an investment bank or even a commercial bank. Am I pursuing that, or am I being a bit too specific, a bit too narrow in my focus? So I would encourage students, to take ownership, which requires a positive attitude. A thick skin doesn't hurt either, right? You get a lot of rejection letters, and you should be okay with that. And then, if your tack is not working out well, try a different tack.
Yeah, it's a good point. Now, I think especially the first point, to take responsibility for your own actions, is really important, and be actually even responsible if you get a rejection letters.
And it's good for you beyond this exercise of looking for a job now. If you start your career with that mindset, everything that happens to me is me. The good stuff and the not so good stuff. As opposed to, they didn't help me. Look at what's happening to the economy. They're not recruiting enough. They decided to do it. It's they. It's difficult to manage a career that way.
Totally.
Well,
I think that's a perfect spot to wrap it up.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to talking to both of you.
So I think we'll just wrap it up there. So thank you very much. And this was Student View. Yes, that's the name. Remember it well. And hopefully be distributed hopefully on everything. So you should be able to find us on all the school management accounts.
Platforms.
Yeah, and please remember to like if there's a like button. I'm not quite sure.
Don't
but
forget
definitely
to
subscribe. But
obviously.
definitely just subscribe. Yes. Well, thank you.
And smash the like button.
Smash the like button, exactly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And
Cool.
see you next episode. Bye.